Game on, everybody, and welcome to another video. Before we get started into the video, I just want to quickly give a shout out and say thank you to all my supporters. If you guys are interested in more videos like this, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. And let's go ahead and get it started. My goal is to basically try to have a weekly update or a bi-weekly update with the Lorcana meta. So if you guys are interested in purchasing any of these cards or decks that I mentioned in this video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link in the description box below. Some prerequisites, just so everybody's familiar, is that I have basically a threshold of a top 32 and beyond, and we're going to only look at the top 4, but because I know that the meta is fairly new and other people want to kind of get a scope as to what other locals and how variant or what other maybe decks can become potentially meta relevant, I wanted to go ahead and include metas or decks or tournament results from between the player ranges of 9 to like 31, but that's separate. So people who want the more meta breakdown, it's also here for you guys. So we're going to go ahead and move over to the breakdowns, and then before we go into the full list, we're going to go ahead and showcase this. So this the chart on the left is basically tournament results with over 32 players, and on the one on the right is basically all top cut results, and I just pulled first place data from those tournaments, and that would basically be a representation somewhere between 3 to 11% with the top cut of 1, and then everything else is kind of like more a standard top cut breakdowns from a more like larger local scene or even higher. There is typically that stipulation of like larger locals, or do you just want a local, so it's not really relevant, but I feel like all data is pretty relevant, so we're going to go ahead and try to use everything here. So for what we have for the larger than 32 player locals or events and such, we see that there is currently a 25% representation for Amber Steel, and then right behind them is also a Ruby Sapphire deck. And if you kind of take a look at a lot of these other decks here, within at least the larger tournaments, you don't actually see any kind of hyper aggro decks running around, which is kind of like surprising because everybody was so sure that that was going to be the meta deck to compete with and attend, with Daisy Duck being relevant. And I will say there is still kind of an aggro deck that I'll go ahead and showcase to you guys here. But ultimately, we can see that it's really kind of like one of those situations where a new set comes out, everybody wants to play aggro, aggro gets solved, we play a new deck, and then we repeat that process. But we can kind of see that there is kind of a diverse meta so far, and that's ultimately really enjoyable to see. And almost any deck, as long as there's a really decent pilot or maybe a decent deck builder with theories that we can reference from across all the different top cut results, we can really kind of shape and reform those decks and make it more viable. So let's go ahead and look at some of the decks. So the very first deck that I wanted to go ahead and showcase was Amber Steel, or Steel Song. And we can go ahead and see that this is technically much more of an aggro build, kind of facilitating the really high lore questers and such. And we do see that Daisy Duck does make an appearance. And usually when I like to play aggro, I always try to throw in like these type of utility cards with steel. That's just my preferred way. A lot of people were more interested in Amethyst Amber for the hyper aggro strategies, but I feel like this gives you a little bit more flexibility, and ultimately there's a lot of great answers and draw power within this deck overall because you have Rapunzel. I do like the Aerial Sonic Warrior. She is one of my favorite cards in the game as far as like artwork goes, but maybe we do see her have a home in this meta, because her shift 4, and whenever you play a song, you can go ahead and pay an additional 2 ink to do 3 more damage to chosen character. And one thing I also want to note is that just because like Daisy is the big bad as far as aggro goes, most aggro threats have a willpower of 1. So a lot of people maybe kind of overcompensate trying to build to counter Daisy, but Daisy really isn't the end all be all, especially if you have big body hitters such as a Smee, or even you can go ahead and shift with the Queen, and then the Queen will basically one-shot the Daisy Ducks. I really like this list overall, but we're going to go ahead and look into another example of an Amber Steel deck. This one is much more mid-range with the Robin Hood shift line, and we are still playing the Cinderella, and Pete, game referee, also makes an appearance, and also Prince Naveen. So I really like this build overall just because it's more of what is the song theme Amber Steel, Steel Song focus is all about. I quite like I said, I really do enjoy this, and the addition of Naveen able to play a whole new world on curve, because we have 1-drop Daisy Duck, 2 into Mr. Smee, 3-drop that can be literally anything really in this deck, but ideally it'd be Ariel, and then that would be your body, basically ready to sing a whole new world on the next turn. And if that ends up getting foiled, you can drop Prince Naveen on turn 4 to hard cast a whole new world for free, and that just feels amazing. Onto a different deck, we're going to look at Ruby Sapphire. So Ruby admittedly isn't my favorite deck kind of color to play personally, but I understand why people play it. It's one of the most strongest colors to be paired with, as long as it has a supplementary engine with it, and Sapphire is by far one of the best supplementary engines. And in this specific deck, we have a bit of the ramp package with Chicha and Donald Duck, featuring some newer cards and Visions of the Future. I personally love this video. If you guys are interested in the math behind Visions of the Future, I strongly recommend you guys go ahead and check out that video that I posted. You guys might be able to learn a little bit of extra things about ratios and how much more you can get away with playing specific ratios of cards. But in this deck, you'll see that this specific one is playing 3 Lucky Dime, and I think that is mostly just a counter to cards such as Hideaway or Cusco. And notably, this deck is not playing Cusco. It is still playing Ice Block and Sisu, so still valuing that kind of combo within the style of deck. I'm not a personal big fan of Ice Block. I can see why people play it, but I think that we can definitely supplement a different kind of strategy, basically getting rid of Sisu. You do get the ability to use the 3-cost human Sisu to be shifted on top with the Sisu empowering sibling. So there is that, but I'm just not a big fan of that specific combo. I feel like there are better cards that you can play, but I guess it makes sense. But we have a decent curve with this deck. You'll basically want to play Popsicle on 1, and then Chicha on 2, and if you're able to follow up, Sing with her 1 jump ahead, and Fishbone Quill on turn 3. That's just pretty awesome as well. No Mickey Mouse. I feel like that is fine because we are playing the 1 jump ahead, but I do like the play of Donald Duck, and it's just basically, you know, the item deck. Item, ramp, removal. It's got all the best answers. Enough to get you to ramp up into those higher drops such as Tamatoa and Maleficent, and this is pretty like standard with a new coat of brand new cards from Shimmering Skies. The next deck I do want to talk about is Amethyst Ruby. So this deck is still relevant for the next, you know, it's been the past 5 sets now, and this deck you can see is back. At least this version has shifted to the 1-drop characters with the 1 willpower, 1 strength, 3 willpower. And another thing I also wanted to note is that this is a fairly decent call versus hyper aggro, because like I tried mentioning before, Daisy Duck is a 1/4 quester. However, every other aggro deck plays just the 1/1 drops, so these can favorably trade basically 3 for 1 in most cases. And once you can go ahead and remove their questers, because they'll run out of gas in their tank essentially, and they'll be on top deck mode, which admittedly that's where they want to be. But if you're making all these favorable trades and comboing it as well with Teeth and Ambitions, and you're able to basically put the additional 2 damage onto these lower questers, it just kind of works out. Diablo still seems to be a pretty relevant card as well, but this is Ruby Amethyst. I don't really typically play Ruby, as I mentioned before. It's got all the great cards, but still opting to play the Sisu and Flynn Rider. I'm not too quite sure how relevant Flynn Rider will be in this upcoming meta. I do like some cards, like the Sword Release, I believe, is the item 1 card that makes your opponent lose lore and you gain lore. I feel like lore reduction could be maybe undervalued, but like I said, I don't really typically play Ruby. This seems like a very standard list. I'm not even recognizing any brand new cards from Shimmering Skies, and that's okay. But this seems to be much more of a meta call. Ruby Amethyst continues to be the, you know, the overall 50-50 deck with no bad matchups, and it's just here it is. On to a next deck, which is the Amber Emerald. We have basically it's a sing together kind of deck, and of course still playing the Diablo and there's a lot of one-ofs in this deck, so I'm not too crazy keen about this. But one thing I do like about this deck is that the inclusion of Prince Naveen, although admittedly maybe not super relevant in this build because it seems to be more on the Prince John package. So I guess maybe this is more of a song discard style deck with Ursula being present. But this is a very solid deck. Now that Bucky isn't really relevant in the meta anymore, this deck had notoriously just struggled versus that deck. So I'm glad to see that this deck is able to, any kind of song themed deck, I'm a big fan of it, and it's got a lot of great cards. I'm just not too crazy about how this build plays a lot of one-ofs, but that being said, it overperformed. It got first place at the Battle Bear, so congrats to this player here. And this is just a more song discard kind of strategy rather than like the songs sing together. Admittedly though, we do have Under the Sea still here to go ahead and remove cards, so it's still got a lot of great cards in here. And I do like this card. I just wish it didn't play too many, or I do like this deck, I just wish it didn't play so many one-ofs, but if it works, it works. And another deck we want to go ahead and showcase is this Amber Ruby deck. It's labeled as Emerald Amber Ruby for some reason. Maybe just the deck name. Not too sure. Maybe just to confuse people. But we do see that it's still playing the Daisy deck as an aggro front end for this. And one thing that I don't typically like about Amber and Ruby combination is that it always kind of defaults to be a Mufasa deck, and Mufasa decks definitely have its place in the meta. I'm just not a big fan, and I really think that you are capable of playing like more non-character cards, and this one actually does. It plays 8 non-character cards, which I really enjoy. It has the Lantern for ramp, and it has 4 Teeth of Ambitions, so whenever you play against a Mufasa deck, and it's basically unexpected to see a non-character cards, or you won't likely see non-character cards is what I mean, but it does have a lot of utilities and tools within this, such as has the draw power. I like the inclusion of Lantern because it's additional ramp. Teeth of Ambition counts as removal, and a lot of these bodies have just a really great strength. You can even see that this deck teched in Maximus that can combo well with Gaston. And at the end of your turn, if you have a character in play with 5 strength or more, gain 2 lore, and if you have any characters in play with 10 or more, gain 5 lore instead. So Gaston coming down as like another copy of like a big statted Maui, like that's great. I love these 9-drop cards and above as a one-off tech card. And yeah, I think this is like probably my most favorite Mufasa build that I've seen, and that's saying a lot because I'm not a big fan of these kinds of decks, but this one seems to kind of have its whole flow. And also, I just want to also mention that if you do decide to play a Mufasa themed deck, Amber Mufasa themed deck, and you want to play more items and or songs in your deck, it's okay to do so. And I would even argue that you mulligan for those so you keep them in your hand, so then that way you're even more likely to hit with your Mufasa. Just a thought, or a thought experiment that I would like to share out with this one. And then on to another color combination that I'm personally very excited about, although I'm not admittedly very excited for this particular build. But like I said, this one came into 3rd place, and congrats to them on at the Lorcana 1K winning for 3rd place. And a lot of this, I would like to kind of call this one more of a bounce ramp kind of deck. And it seems to have a lot of aggro decks in check with the lower drops on this one. So even playing the Ursula Mad Sea Witch, which is a 1/3 but has Challenger +2. So theoretically making it a 2-drop 3/3 on your turn when attacking. Wish it had Rush, and surprisingly to me, this deck isn't playing Cogsworth, the one that does the 1/1 drop. The 1 cost 1/1 gives Rush to any character, including himself. People don't forget that. And also this one, maybe opting in for Magicka Dispel, the one that prevents your opponent from discarding your hand. If there is a discard deck or Emerald is running around discarding your hand, definitely a great card. I love that card, the Magicka Dispel, just because it's an inkable card and doesn't really feel like a wasted slot. So if you end up playing against Emerald, having this in your deck and just playing it outright seems pretty good just to have. I've been really trying to play with this deck combination personally, trying to make it work. and this one almost seems pretty close to what I have, in the sense of like I'm playing Tipo and I'm playing Mickey Mouse, and I also opted in for Donald Duck, but this one is not playing any Merlin, the Shift Merlin, which I think is a fantastic card. But again, with this color combination, it kind of struggles with really wide boards, so you really have to make those really early trades with your Madam Mim, um, and basically trying to rush trade 1-for-1s and then get into that late game, but trying to keep a body still on board. So I tried keeping like locations, so then that way your opponent is like forced to deal with your locations, and that kind of gives you like a breather room, because if they're not questing to run away with the game, they're challenging your locations, and then that leaves them vulnerable for like any of your rush characters. But this deck just needs an answer to like remove wide boards. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a great... I mean, it's still a pretty like solid color. It's just like it draws a lot of cards and it ramps, but after that, what does it do afterwards? Let It Go being one of the best removal options, and Elsa the Fifth Spirit, also another great card that was included for set 5. Love these kinds of cards, and this deck also opted to play 2 copies of Mufasa. I'm kind of seeing a trend of people playing just up to 2 Mufasas in any of their decks if they do decide to include it. Going back to like even Prince Naveen, people seem to be opting to play 2 copies, maybe somewhere around 3 copies of him. I don't know if that's the correct ratio, but in my personal testing, Mufasa seems pretty solid as a 2 of, and Prince Naveen, I like him as a 3 of. So going on a minor tangent there, but this deck also playing Ursula, Sea Witch Queen. I like that card in the sense of it kind of really helps stabilize your game and makes your opponent really struggle to playing song cards, or song actions that can't be sung and such. So it's like a minor floodgate. This Elsa Spirit of Winter is also a really great card. In my personal build, I'm playing 1 Elsa Spirit of Winter and 1 the Anna that on play. She's a 7 cost, uninkable, exerts all characters. But like I said, I'm also playing like the Merlin. I'm playing 3 Shift Merlins in my version. So if you guys are interested in seeing any of my personal take on deck builds, go ahead and feel free to leave me a comment, and I'll try to see if I can make a video regarding different deck builds that I've had, and we can go ahead and even maybe bring those decks to locals and see how well we do. But moving on, I do believe I have 1 more deck here, maybe 2 more, so stick around to see what I have here. So this is Sapphire Steel. So Sapphire Steel is another one of those fan favorites, those blue steel ink combinations. Sapphire Steel is the set that, or the color combination that I played last set, and the new inclusions for this deck seems to be Chicha and Donald Duck and the Simba, son of Mufasa. So basically it's kind of the same but different, because the inclusion of Simba allows us to deal with items and locations, really great for the mirror match. And then other things that you might want to include is maybe a Cusco. Cusco just seems to be a better answer in those mirrors, because if your opponent ends up getting Lucky Dime and I drop a Mufasa and I crack their Lucky Dime, they can just refetch it again with Tamatoa. Although being an expensive card, they are probably at that point where they can just spend the 9 ink and use it immediately on Tamatoa. So it kind of feels really bad in that sense. So using a Cusco or even a Hideaway could be a better answer overall. But then that can see a resurgence of people playing 3 Lucky Dimes in their deck, which historically we've only ever played 2 Lucky Dimes, and I mean, that could all change. The inclusion of 3 Hades seems to be pretty heavy as well. In my personal build, I didn't really ever use him, but because we do have the higher ramp cards such as Chicha, Mickey Mouse Detective, and now Donald Duck, which I love the Donald Duck in this deck because he is now a great 5-drop slot character, because previously it was we were playing Hard-Headed Beast as the 5-drop, and that was only like relevant for like the mirror match. But when you play Donald Duck, not only can he sing your 5-cost songs such as Grab Your Swords and A Whole New World, or even Let It Go for that matter, you can go ahead and drop him down, and then he adds an extra ink. And I kind of want to also try to include maybe just the one-off Mufasa, see if I can get it off. But that is just pretty good. You can see this deck is also playing 4 Along Came Zeus. I've always been pretty hard stuck about dropping or upping this card to 4 copies, especially now that we have a direct answer to items and locations with like Mufasa or even Cusco. I feel like 3 is probably really good. But it could be used as a wonderful one-off like card to also just quickly deal with the Daisy Ducks. But overall, I really do enjoy where we currently are with the meta. It feels really wide open, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video and thought it was very insightful. If you guys are interested in more content, please consider leaving a like, subscribe, and leave me a comment on what decks you guys are trying and playing out. And I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm out of here.